Radio Free Brighton, and joining me in the studio this evening is Kevin Annett, my apologies, Kevin Annett, who's visiting us from Canada because he's speaking this weekend in Brighton at the Peace and Environment Centre, and later on the day at the Earth and Stars. He's here because he's come to tell us about the deliberate extinction of Indigenous people in Canada, as people have been grabbing land there, and he's here to launch a book also. Kevin, welcome to the studio. How did you get involved in this? How did you find out about what was happening in Canada?
Well, for me it started almost 20 years ago. I was a Protestant clergyman on the west coast of Canada. I began to meet Native people in the town I was in, and they began to tell me stories. I naturally wanted to, help them out. I invited them into church. We opened a food bank, and as I got to know people personally, the numbers of these stories grew, and I was shocked at first. I didn't know what to do because they were telling me stories literally of murder going on in these Indian boarding schools run by what was then my church, the United Church of Canada. And I went to church officials and began to share these stories, and they told me right across the board that I shouldn't believe these stories, that the Indians were making them up. The fairly racist attitude, But the more the people came in, the more I realized I couldn't ignore the stories, especially since I was seeing the impact in the community now. There were the huge rate of teenage suicide, family violence. I knew a lot of that stuff was coming from somewhere, and none of the whites wanted to talk about it. So I began to learn to, investigate it myself, and that kind of in a nutshell is what started me on this whole journey.
And so what did you do about it?
Well, the first thing I did is I gave a forum for people. So I let people come into the church and speak about it from the pulpit and on other meetings. That caused a lot of upset among certain elements in the church. The older white people who knew that people had run the residential schools. And I was told in no uncertain terms to stop that, to not let those people speak. But I said, well, I felt the church should be a place where people should be safe to tell their story and be who they were. So I began to record the stories and document it, and that led to a certain parting of the ways between me and the church, because after about 2.5 years of doing that, I found out that there was a whole kind of hidden history where the church their first missionaries had grabbed this land, and then, from Native people, and then they sold it off to logging companies and various other corporate interests for a lot of money, and none of the money ever went to the Native people themselves. So I just wrote a letter about that saying I didn't think that was right, and within a few weeks of me doing that, I was fired unilaterally, eventually defrocked. I have the honor of being the only minister in the United Church history to ever be publicly defrocked. About $250,000 they spent tossing me out, and they spared no cost in trying to destroy my life too. They went to my wife at the time and offered to help her with her divorce. I mean, I document a lot of this in my film Unrepentant. But they were definitely trying to stop me in every way, because I was learning more and more of this whole hidden history of what had really gone on in the Indian residential schools, which most Canadians still don't want to talk about or hear about.
So